So I'm Tim, CEO of Correlated. We're building a platform to help B2B SaaS go-to-market teams use their customer data to understand which users and accounts to target with go-to-market messaging and playbooks. And we decided to build predominantly on top of the warehouse, and Snowflake's a huge part of that. And so as we were kind of doing that and working with a lot of our customers, we started to see this as a really burgeoning trend. And so we thought it'd be really helpful to dig in a little bit more on why, building on top of Snowflake is so important. What does that actually mean? And so to do that, I thought it'd be great to convene some other CEOs and founders of companies that are doing the same thing across kind of different areas. And then we were lucky enough to have Luke join us from Snowflake, who works with a lot of these companies directly as part of his day job to help us discuss this topic. So why don't I quickly pass it, maybe before we toss it to you, Luke, you can be kind of the last one to introduce yourself. I'm going to toss it to Tristan, and Tristan, you can toss it to George for quick intros of your companies and yourselves, and then we'll go over to Luke and get the moderation kicked off.
Thanks, Tim. So hi, I'm Tristan. I'm the CEO of Continual, Continual.ai, and we're building a machine learning platform for the modern data stack. It sits on top of cloud data warehouses or data platforms like Snowflake, and makes it incredibly easy for data teams to build predictive models that never stop getting better, right? So that are continually maintained, updated, using all the data that's sitting in these underlying data platforms. So, we're a big fan of what Snowflake is doing and building on top of these modern cloud data platforms for a number of reasons. And I'm excited to share some thoughts with everybody here. And I guess I'm passing off to George.
Hi, everyone. I'm George. I'm the CEO of Supergrain. And Supergrain is a customer engagement platform built on top of modern data platforms like Snowflake. So we help marketers run personalized email campaigns, personalized messaging campaigns, segmentation, all on top of your Snowflake data. And I guess I'll pass it to Luke.
Yeah, thanks, George. Yeah, I'm Luke Ambrosetti. I'm a partner solutions engineer here at Snowflake. I'm not a CEO. So, I'm the only non-CEO at this roundtable. The Powered by Snowflake program helps companies, apps, like these three, build on top of Snowflake. We'll get into it today, but Snowflake sees apps on top of the data platform, especially Snowflake, as a feature, right? So this conversation will be kind of span from what are connected applications and data apps, through kind of the benefits to how each of these apps are being used today by their customers. If you have questions, please submit, let us know. Again, this is a kind of a not a scripted discussion whatsoever. We have a few questions that we're going to be asking to some of the folks here, but again, we'd love to have your questions. So we'll see where this conversation takes us. All right, so let's get started. One of the short list of questions that I have here that we talked about. Let's first talk about, what is a kind of a modern cloud data platform, or sometimes called a modern cloud data warehouse, and how has that platform changed over time, and how they change, or how have people changed the way that they use them. And I'll pass this first over to Tristan.
Thanks, Luke. Well, you obviously probably have some thoughts on this, so I'll let you chime in after. I had a front row seat to some of the evolution around data platforms from my time at Cloudera. I was at Cloudera, the large sort of Hadoop, big data platform company for a while in the 2010, 2016 era. I sort of think of cloud data warehouses or cloud data platforms as an evolution in general data platforms. So a first generation of platform or cloud data or just data warehouse would be your traditional on-premise data warehouse. There's always been, for 30, 40 years, there's been this general realization that companies need to bring data together and do analytics and reporting on top of it. And that, the birth of the sort of SQL and data warehouses in general, really to solve that problem. That first generation of data warehouse, typically didn't scale. So it wasn't able to handle huge amounts of data. They tried really hard to make them more and more powerful, but that was always a struggle. Not only to handle a lot of data, but to handle a lot of workloads. It was often very costly as well. We then saw, and I saw this firsthand, the rise of sort of the data lake architecture, right? Kind of copying what some of the hyperscalers had done, Google, Facebook, et cetera, the rise of Hadoop, where it was really about saying, hey, we're entering this era of big data. We need a system that fundamentally can store and bring together all that data. Let's give up a lot of sort of the structure and governance that we have from a data warehouse, and let's just throw it all into a data lake, and maybe we'll solve scale. We'll give up some things, but that trade-off would be useful. So I think what I saw there was, we introduced a tremendous amount of complexity, and also we actually struggled to bring all of the data on, largely because we lacked elasticity. So these clusters were often on premise, where you had a fixed number of compute resources, and so you weren't able to actually bring all the workloads necessarily easily onto the platform that you wanted to. And also architecturally, many of them didn't separate storage and compute completely, so you weren't able to isolate different workloads as much as you would want. And again, that would stop you from bringing all of your workloads onto one platform. And so the way I think about cloud data warehouses is really as solving that kind of key problem of scale, right? Embracing elasticity, embracing cloud, allowing you finally to bring all your data onto one platform. And then two, which I think is a little bit underappreciated, is bringing all the workloads onto one platform in a safe way. And that really is enabled by this fundamental technological shift, which is the separation of storage and compute. So in Snowflake, that's multiple warehouses. And the fact that you don't have to, you have no interference between your different workloads. You've got data science and machine workload, you could have a reporting workload, those could all be running on shared data. And now I think what I'm particularly excited about is what this unlocks for a next set of innovation. So things like the ability to actually have workloads from other companies run on your data, right, with data sharing. The ability to bring applications directly to run onto the platform with ideas of connected apps or data apps without actually moving data. This idea of having scale, elasticity, having isolation enables all of these downstream innovations. And I think we're in the early innings of that.
Yeah, totally agreed. Yeah, and thank you for the Snowflake plug there. Yeah, and so on Snowflake, you can definitely, that's what we're built for. All the workloads, all on one platform. Yeah, and as you said, it's bringing the applications back to the data, right? With a lot of traditional SaaS, it's okay, push your data to these apps. Now you can really truly bring your app to sit on top of the data directly. So, now let's go into what is a data application, a data app. Right, I'm actually going to pass this to George first on how you would define kind of what's being called a data app today.
Yeah, it's a very loaded term. I feel like there's a lot of definitions floating around, but the way we see data apps at Supergrain is essentially it's kind of based on this premise that your cloud data platform or something like Snowflake is the source of truth for your data. So there's a connection to the customer's data warehouse, data cloud, and then you're able to run workloads directly on top of that data platform. So this might be analytical workloads, this might be other types of workloads, machine learning types of workloads, but any application that is able to run at least part of its workload on the customer's data platform, we consider that to be a data application. Now, obviously there's a lot of different types of workloads, different types of use cases that might require a specialized infrastructure. And we can talk about some of those use cases. I don't think, we don't adhere to such a strict definition that every single workload of the application must run on top of the customer's infrastructure in order to be considered a data app. Certainly, I think there would be, a lot of cleanliness and maybe that's where the future will take us. But in a lot of ways, we're not quite there yet. So today, there's a lot of hybrid architectures that we get to see, depending on what your use cases are and workloads are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say kind of most of what you define is what we at Snowflake would consider a connected app. And again, that's kind of what we're talking about today, are connected apps. At Snowflake, we define data applications as three types of deployment models, right? Connected being one of them, right? So you have an application that runs and treats the customer Snowflake account as that source of truth. You also have kind of your more traditional managed application model, where at Snowflake you're using data sharing between the customer and the app provider to operate on and use that data. And then lastly, something pretty new at Snowflake, and not of course released yet or in GA yet, is the native application framework, which is the application runs completely on Snowflake. And so yeah, we this idea of a warehouse native app kind of encapsulates both the connected app and the native app model deployment methods that we talked about, that I mentioned. But yeah, today let's really dive in on connected apps specifically. I really want to touch on, what are the biggest benefits that y'all see of connected apps? And I think I'm going to go to Tim first for this one.
Yeah, so great question. And I think one of the reasons why we've chosen to kind of architect our product with the data warehouse and Snowflake kind of as being in the middle of it is because of the benefits that we're seeing. So one of the biggest ones for us is that it is basically a central repository, and George kind of alluded to this, I think you used this term, source of truth for our customers. So, we work predominantly with B2B SaaS companies that have a self-serve business model. The kind of data, customer data in particular, that they're collecting is pretty varied and coming from different sources. So it could be things like from their production applications, maybe Postgres. It could be things like billing data from Stripe or other places. It could be product usage data that maybe they're collecting using a tool like Segment. And then obviously they have maybe a modern CRM like a HubSpot or Salesforce. And then, n number of other SaaS tools and products that are, across the stack. And so you start to get to a point where there are 10, 20 or more different sources of customer data that they're collecting across different tools that are, defining or part of, the different parts of their business. And so the benefit of Snowflake is that many of these companies we're working with are centralizing all of that data within a Snowflake. And then for us, we're allowed to basically benefit from that centralization. Use sort of the data that they're putting in Snowflake, cleaning, and then doing different transformations or modeling on top of the power a kind of more well-defined canonical view of the customer and playbooks within Correlated. So we don't have to build point-to-point integrations with all these different tools that might have different data models that might be kind of in different levels of sync. We can kind of just connect that to Snowflake and have this great clean data set, ideally clean data set to work off of. So that's a huge benefit for us, and something that we're seeing is a big driver for why we're building on top of Snowflake.
Perfect. And so I think of benefits of the connected app model as in two different ways, right? One for the provider, right? One for y'all as you're building your apps, and then one for the customer, or one side, right, of each. Let's kind of talk about the benefits for the application, for those developing the applications like yourselves. What are some of the key things? I'll mention kind of like one of my favorites is reducing your COGS, your cost of goods sold, and being able to kind of push more compute to the customer's Snowflake account. So can you tell us, and I'll open this up to anybody. Tell us more about kind of what that does for your business, and and what you see your customers doing with that too.
Well, I think a huge one for us is the onboarding experience. So typically for machine learning, in order to do machine learning models and build them, you've got to bring all of your data, and you got to model all of your data. If we fundamentally have an architecture where we suck all data into our system, and then the user needs to model it in our system, process it in our system, that's a complete silo from their underlying cloud data platform. Not only is that a lot for us to build technically in a very challenging domain that is not our core necessarily our core focus, but it's also a tremendous amount for the customer to do. So the idea that we can just, in Continual, you just sort of sign up, you kind of put in your Snowflake credentials, and boom, you have access to all of your, customer 360 data, and you build a churn model or an LTV model or some activation forecast that you have. And really that can take minutes. You can do it like on a customer call. You can almost sort of like just do it like an onboarding call. You can just connect to them and kind of get their baseline predictive model, up and running. And they've already done typically a lot of the data preparation, integration, modeling work, as part of their kind of core data platform reporting and analytical needs. And so that sort of just accelerated onboarding is huge. The COGS aspect, the governance aspect, there's a whole, there's a lot of other, ancillary benefits as well. But that sort of single source of truth leading to sort of fast onboarding, lack of duplication of work, I think is really compelling both for us and then ultimately the customer. So it's like kind of a win-win.
Yeah, I would add on to what Tristan mentioned. Certainly the onboarding piece is a big one for us because for the same reasons. The other thing that comes to mind is just the flexibility. So because you can run workloads on something like Snowflake, that means you can have access to the power of SQL and the flexibility of SQL under the hood to express a lot of different types of business logic, relational joins that you are not able to do in some other systems. So in our space, which is marketing automation and customer engagement, traditional platforms have a lot of restrictions on the types of business logic, the types of triggers, the types of campaigns that they can run, because they have to model the data in a very strict way, in a very particular way, to solve for some of the constraints of just running your own infrastructure.
Yeah, so with that, because they're because the customer is really taking the compute on themselves, it means they can kind of control that speed, right? If they wanted to increase the warehouse size, they can. If they want to do multi-clustering, they can, right? And so you can tune the application, to each customer can tune that application, based on their needs and based on how they set up, their account and their platform. Any other thoughts on kind of the benefits from either the provider or customer side before we go forward?
I mean, there's obviously this one around, security and governance. This comes up today in every single conversation with customers. There's always a security step, sort of a security audit with the customer. What's your, what sort of certifications do you have? And it's tremendously helpful. We just say we never persist or store any customer data in our platform, so you never have to worry that it's going to be sitting over in our thing. Yes, maybe we do access it. Maybe not everything is pushed down yet. Although even the next step, right, we can push more and more down. Maybe nothing except metadata leaves the cloud data warehouse. And that simplifies, that makes them trust our platform more. They get much more comfortable at it, and that comes up in literally every conversation.
And there's nothing more gratifying with being able to put NA on those security, questions on the RFP, because it doesn't. Exactly. Like you're saying, it doesn't apply.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go. Sorry, one more person. Oh, sorry. All right, let's go. So the next topic that I have here, I don't think we have any questions yet. One next episode. What are some of the current challenges with this model? Right. I mean, this is a very new, very early model that's happening. That's new thing that's being done. It's not seen widely just yet. So what are some of the challenges or that you see customers having, or that you see maybe other apps like this happening?
I could start with that, and certainly interested in the audience. If there's anyone who wants to chime in, one of the things we've seen is that there's a huge reliance on sort of analytics engineering or analyst talent to make sure that your data is modeled appropriately in Snowflake. I think it might not need to be said, but I think you need to say it. Like, if you just dump everything into your data warehouse and leave it as is, like, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So I think there's a ton of skill and a little bit of work required to kind of get those dozens of data sources that I mentioned before kind of modeled appropriately in your warehouse, so that you can then use it in a more operational way downstream, or for analytics for that matter. So I think that's one challenge that we see for us, at least, where it's something that we work with our customers on and see as a big can be a big stumbling block.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Sort of the power of these underlying data platforms is the ability to integrate your data, but then somebody does need to integrate it, does need to model it. And so I think there's this, like, we sometimes see, for instance, like a Shopify, retailer, there might be a solution to do some sort of predictive analytics for Shopify data. So we have one customer that's like this. It's very tempting to go down that route. All of a sudden, they start to open brick and mortar stores, and all of that sort of plug and play capability that they had from their Shopify data, which maybe that vendor could have sort of just say, okay, I know the data is only coming from Shopify. It goes out the window. Now they're stuck with basically technical debt that can't be transported, extended. And they're kind of left in, well, what am I supposed to do? My customer 360 includes, point of sale data, and I also have Shopify data. What do I do now? And so I think there are some solutions. If you don't have to model the data and you just sort of suck it all into some vertical solution, you can get to your result really, really quickly. But it doesn't really have the flexibility that I think most data-driven companies ultimately need, particularly as they mature.
Yeah, +1 to all of that. I think the data modeling piece is the biggest challenge that we've seen. It's just, again, the customer 360 is a core part of what we do. We essentially allow you to run campaigns and segmentation and workflows on top of that. So it's having that modeled correctly, having the right events, having the right objects from all the different sources already landed inside something like Snowflake is really core to making the connected model useful and successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. People sometimes think it's, oh, if I just put my data here, it's fine. But no, you do need that data maturity to be strong for, I think, for this use case. Now, as time moves on, I think some of these apps can help with the modeling side, especially to help those more non-technical, slightly technical roles go through and define their business logic and have the app actually do some of that within there. I've seen some of that already today and some of the connected apps that I've seen. So no questions yet. Please, if you have questions, let us know. Love to answer, answer any and all questions. But if we don't have any questions, I'll just keep going down the list that I have. On the very similar to this last question, and maybe we don't need to talk a whole lot about it, but when should you think about adopting this type of application versus using kind of a more a standard SaaS application? Besides me, that we talked about data maturity and the modeling, are there any other factors that you might think of?
I think for me, and this is maybe just our neck of the woods. I think if you're a smaller startup, let's say between 0 to 20 or 30 employees, you probably don't need to go all the way where we're describing. I would say starting from day 0 and having a warehouse actually is more possible today than ever, and thanks to Snowflake. So not recommending you don't do that necessarily, but I think where we're seeing a lot of adoption is where things get more complex, where you start to have this bigger stack and more complexity around just the amount of customers, amount of users, you're scaling your product, scaling your business. You have a bigger go-to-market team in our case. And so I think that's where there's more of a clear benefit to this sort of thing. And so I'd say for anyone in the audience, maybe is that slightly smaller company, maybe it's not not necessarily the time to dive in here. But if you're at one of those growth stage or larger companies, it might be more appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just in general, maybe a data platform like Snowflake isn't for the 5-person startup just yet. As maybe as you get more data and you start to use more tooling and you're getting more data from more sources, absolutely. But early on, probably doesn't make as much sense. Before we go on, any other comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Tim said. I think it is amazing, how much earlier it is possible to adopt all of this technology than it was, 5 years ago. If I look at, even us, we're a relatively small early stage startup, and what is our analytical stack? We have Fivetran. We're pulling data off of our operational data system into Snowflake. We're pulling it off of our CRM into Snowflake. And we have to combine that information, right? We have all this information about our users and their activity that we're interested in, and we have information from our sales and kind of field teams that is captured in our CRM. Fundamentally, we got to capture that and model it, to understand the business. And so, we do. What's the alternative, really? And so now, in our case, you absolutely need somebody that's like an analytics engineer to be involved with that, but you don't need a big platform team. So, right, we just, we don't have it's basically one person who's like a part-time role to do that, versus I think in the past, right, you're standing up, managing, you have your DBA, you have your whole architecture, data flow streaming, all this stuff. Okay, fine, then definitely postpone, right? But I think when you're in this world, you can do it earlier than much earlier than before.
Great. Yeah, no, completely agreed. I'll still invite questions, but we have I think 1 or 2 more before we run out here. One of my favorite topics that this next question comes from, it gets maybe a little bit spicier. on the debate side here is kind of where is this going, right? What's the future of applications and the connected applications? Where does that leave, a lot of what, data pipelines doing today, right? We think about, ETL or reverse ETL. How do you all think that, this is going to fully replace that, or it's maybe, for certain use cases? Would love everyone's thoughts there.
I can maybe start, and I'd certainly love to hear Tristan and George. I kind of view this current, innovation cycle as maybe a rethink a bit of what you saw a few years ago with like segments and then like tools like Amplitude or Mixpanel. And so, if you look at those companies and those products, they really actually evolved together, and they were really great. Partners, and they were in the ecosystem together. The rise of segment collecting kind of events and being a customer data platform, helped enable applications and products like Amplitude or Mixpanel for product analytics, and eventually Amplitude and Mixpanel built ways, pretty canonical ways themselves, their own products to collect that data. And so you didn't need segment, but they still saw a huge percentage of their customers using segment. So I think for us, if you assume Snowflake is kind of the now kind of disconnected customer data platform that's more infrastructure, you can think of reverse ETL as being a really important layer connecting to kind of the operational side, and then modern applications that are thinking about things from the warehouse-centric, warehouse-first model data perspective versus point-to-point solutions is kind of the next step. So I think, at least for us, and we work closely, a lot of our customers are using Census and High Touch, some of the leading reverse ETL solutions. We view it as a synergistic relationship. So that's my take. But yeah, I'd love to hear Tristan and George.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think, the core theme here is, I think all these technologies, whether you're a pipeline product or you're a connected app, you're essentially getting value out of your data platform. And I think that creates an incentive within the organization to put more and more data and do the data modeling that we talked about a little bit earlier, that is so important in making something like Snowflake actually usable. So in some ways, I think the incentives are aligned, and it creates the right incentives on the customer side to really invest in the data platform, which then benefits anybody that is running an application on top, whether you're a connected application or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm echoing what people are saying. I don't think it necessarily will replace all data movement, right? You have all sorts of systems. You got to move data. They probably won't all natively support, sharing necessarily directly into, your cloud data warehouse of choice, Snowflake, for instance. And like, it's probably even harder to go the other direction out in terms of, making them so they can all suck data out. But certain things, I mean, like, cross-company data sharing, the idea that, you're kind of building entire API interfaces that, have all sorts of funky semantics and limited, throughput and all this stuff to share with for instance, your suppliers. I think it's very compelling to just say, hey, let's stop, sending around CSV files. Let's stop, creating, having engineering teams build these integration APIs. Let's just share some data that's sitting in beautifully modeled inside of a cloud data warehouse. And I think that's going to sort of maybe it starts inside your company, then it goes to your partners and your close partners where you really control the relationship. But I could see that kind of going out further and further towards the applications, the SaaS vendors, right? So you see that. I think there was an announcement with Snowflake. With Salesforce, kind of trying to natively share data into Snowflake, and I can imagine that as well. I think the beautiful thing about this is that with this architecture is that it kind of gives us all a point of connectivity, right? So in Continual we make a prediction about customer churn or like how much usage they're going to have in 6 months. And then a product like Correlated can use it to put it and actually activate their sales team and make it have an impact on the sales team. And then Supergrain or something like that can send out marketing emails or campaigns or build audiences based off of it. And I didn't even need to build an integration with anybody else. I just put the data back into the data warehouse, and then whoever needs it picks it up. And that's that's great. I mean, that's great for me as a product builder and I think from putting on your architect hat in a company, it's also a great like data architecture for a company.
Absolutely, I agree with you all too, right? I think it does the integration side. It does make it easier if everything's integrating with your data platform, your data warehouse, whatever term you want to use for that, data cloud. But I really, at the end of the day, I do think there are going to be some companies or partners out there who probably are just never going to move towards this model, and that's okay. I think, and really what I'm trying to say is, I think there's always going to be a need for integration out there. So whether that's going to be the top 50 sources, whether that's going to move more towards the sharing, or if that's going to like Salesforce is now, or whatever happens, I still think there's going to be a need for integration, because not everyone's going to be able to do kind of the sharing aspect, or be able to integrate with that your cloud platform directly. So great, yeah. I'll say one of the, and speaking of, as even though as I represent Snowflake, I think Snowflake is the best data platform. One of the best things about this solution is you can, if you want to, use different platforms or different sources, right? You're not tied. Let's say you have maybe some data in Snowflake, and then some data in another platform, and maybe it's an OLTP database, right? With connected apps, one of the best things about that solution, or this deployment model, is that you can use different sources or different platforms, sometimes at the same time, depending on the app. And I think all three apps here do that, if I'm not mistaken. Awesome, great, yeah. And it's again one of a great feature of this deployment model overall. Really, we don't have a whole lot. We really don't have much to cover on the kind of the prep question side. I'd love to hear some questions from the audience if they have anything on the top of their head.
Well, Luke, I can ask you a question. How about this? You've been doing such a good job moderating. So I asked it to the group, and maybe someone will chime in the chat. But yeah, I think I saw a LinkedIn post from you yesterday around a particular connected app in the security space, and so feel free to use that as an example. But yeah, I'd love to hear kind of like some of the we can all talk our own book here about Correlated, Continual, Supergrain, but yeah, I'd love to hear kind of other applications you've seen that you feel are kind of pushing the envelope, and some of the things that you see kind of looking out on the horizon a bit are cool on the connected app side.
Yeah, the cybersecurity space has been fascinating for me. I'm new to it myself, but I've learned a ton here while I've been at Snowflake, and that those companies, our partners there, are really diving into creating connected apps on Snowflake, because there's just so much data that comes, especially when you think. I mean, you have a few different categories of cybersecurity. You have security information and event management. You have cloud security, and you have compliance, right? Are kind of the three main partners that we're seeing, and all three of those kind of groups are building connected apps, right? Because Snowflake is acting as that security data lake to ingest all of that security data from your systems, and then they're running detections off of that too. And they're seeing, so then one of the articles I posted the other day, they're seeing a huge cost reduction for using a platform like Snowflake versus another platform that's been traditionally used for the security data. So it's been, again, really fascinating to see on the cybersecurity side. There's some analytics types of apps that are doing this as well. I think analytics is a very good way to use a type of app for this. Houseware won the Snowflake Startup Challenge. You're familiar with them, so it's been great to see, of course, the kind of the classical BI or analytics use cases as well use this model. So one question that I do see, and we talked about this a little bit, right, is do warehouse native apps make reverse ETL workflows redundant, right? And so maybe let's if we dive on this a little bit further, right? So George, I maybe want to go to you, right? If I were to use a tool like Supergrain, would I need to reverse ETL data, out of my cloud platform?
Out of Snowflake. Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about just a bit ago. With Supergrain, we have a direct connection to your Snowflake, and so you wouldn't need to use reverse ETL with Supergrain. But one of the things that we do see is, customers use reverse ETL with connected apps because there's always a long tail of applications that that don't have the connected app model, and organizations need to figure out how to move fast and eventually get the job done with whatever means they can. And so I feel like this goes to kind of the two approaches being very complementary. You're always going to have a few applications that really benefit from the connected app model, and I think in our space, marketing automation, customer engagement, there's a lot of benefits as we've talked about. But not every single category or not every single vertical of applications is going to have the same benefits or need to have a connected app model. And in that case, something like reverse ETL, having a pipeline between your Snowflake and the application makes a lot of sense.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, and so I know Supergrain, you do some own media channels like email, whereas if you need to do some like a Facebook or Google, right, ads, audience or to send data there, reverse ETL is probably a better solution for the more of the paid media channels. At least for now. Let's see if Facebook and Google will jump on either the connected app or the data sharing side soon. But I don't have too much faith, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even if they do certainly for Continual, just to kind of echo that, you're not going to reverse ETL all your data into, your machine learning platform. That's right. So for us, being a destination for reverse ETL, that doesn't make sense. But are the predictions that we're generating, right, absolutely go into a long tail of applications, and it's that architecture is incredible. We see high touch and senses all the time as a way to take predictions and then put them into your traditional applications that don't necessarily have native capabilities. I would say that, one other thing about a lot of these reverse ETL tools is they have audience building, right? So sometimes you want to model and build audiences in one single place, or build metrics, or build sort of do a little bit of that. Here's how I want to get these audiences or these sort of facts into the downstream systems. There's still kind of a question on what is the interface to do that. Is it simply just SQL and you're using a tool like dbt and you're more of an engineer, or do you need to enable a marketer to sort of build that audience and then kind of push it or build that metric? There's a lot of interest in sort of these metric stores and then push it into multiple downstream systems. So I think it'll be interesting that applications like Supergrain and Correlated, how do you kind of write some of those things that you're building back into the data warehouse or expose them in a way that could then potentially be pushed into other tools? I'd be actually interested in how you think about that.
I could give our how we're thinking about it. And certainly George and I just met in person last week. We talked a little bit about this, and he can share that if he wants. So for us, I think where the reverse ETL folks have done a great job is really enabling kind of that analytics engineer or data team to work on top of the warehouse with SQL and then bring that down into custom fields and Salesforce or other platforms. It's just sort of model data and then express it in these operational tools where it's typically been hard to do that. They did obviously, they both, I think, the leaders come out with more of a drag and drop or kind of UI based audience building tool, which I think helps a lot of maybe less technical folks do the same thing. I think it's our belief that there's vertical use cases that a horizontal tool like reverse ETL can't possibly do at all. And so, for our neck of the woods, which is B2B and working with go-to-market teams there, they have data teams that help them. But at the end of the day, we want to be closer to the go-to-market teams and help them figure out which accounts and which users, are ready to convert or expand and help sales teams, help marketing teams, help customer success teams. And so they're not going to be writing SQL and they may not even, be able to use an audience builder tool because they may not know which, the filters to use. And so we're building a lot at the kind of application level. We built a lot at the application level to help them figure out, on top of the warehouse, what should be these cohorts, what cohorts should they target, how should they think about their customer lifecycle and customer journey, and what are some of the things they should build. And so that's been our approach. And I think we could benefit from reverse ETL sending maybe some of the model data and metrics to us, and then we can help on our application level build on top of that. Or we can directly connect to Snowflake if you don't have reverse ETL in place yet.
Yeah. To add on to that, I think, the example, Luke, that you mentioned of, essentially not only just using the data that's already in the warehouse, but also writing it back and providing that almost as an asset for other applications, whether it's reverse ETL or otherwise to read and consume. That's actually something that we're already doing at Supergrain. So, we have an audience builder UI. You can create audiences, and those audiences are persisted and actually stored, maintained inside of Snowflake. And so that exact use case exists for us. What I would say though is, I don't see that. I see ultimately there's kind of the vertical solutions, and then there's more horizontal solutions. And I think at the end of the day, the people who really benefit are the customers, right? Because different customers are going to want to centralize or use the horizontal or vertical solution for a lot of different use cases. Maybe in our case, the marketer that's running the campaigns, they really want to use our audience builder because it's really, really integrated with our email building and delivery and messaging functionality. Whereas I think if you are trying to do something else, then it might make sense to use an audience builder that lives inside of a horizontal tool like reverse ETL. And I think we see kind of customers along that spectrum. So it really depends on your specific use cases, the maturity of your company, what you really need to get done. And, I think it's a great world in which a lot of these pieces are interoperable and the customer gets to basically decide based on what makes the most sense for them.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone for the response there. Another question that came in, and I love this question. I'm going to augment it just a little bit. So, when kind of selling or even implementing this type of solution, a connected app, it's a very big kind of paradigm shift for customers, right? And so what are some of the biggest challenges that y'all face when trying to get those customers to get the data into the data platform first? Because they may not have it there, and so that it can be used with the connected apps. So I'll give an example. I'll give an example here, right, to start off, right? So a lot of times, I came from a world where customers were used to uploading CSVs, right? Oh, I just need to upload my CSV of data into your platform, then I can use it. I'm like, not really. That's not how this works. We connect to a database or a data warehouse, and then that's where you can operate with your data. So it was a very big shift for people, for customers to think about how they had to operate with their data. So that's, I guess, one story for me.
For me, so thinking about machine learning use cases, I think I don't face this as acutely necessarily because machine learning tends to be sort of in the hierarchy of needs. It's sort of later in the hierarchy of needs. And so by the time we see a customer, they've really stored their data, processed, done analytics, done reporting, done some modeling, and then they're saying, hey, we want to go the next level. That's predictions. We don't have that sort of like, I have no data in my data warehouse problem. Although we do talk to some customers like that. I think one thing that's interesting and a little bit unique in the machine learning world that's a challenge for us in terms of data is time, and having a complete history of data over time is incredibly important to make predictions. So what did you know about a customer in the past, right? What was their behavior in the past, so that I can make a prediction about something in the future? To train a model, and you want to say, does the customer churn? You need to know their activity 6 months ago and all the features and information that you knew about the customer, and you can't have any new data leak into that. If any new data leaks into that, your model is going to go completely haywire. This is actually a big challenge with a lot of vertical tools. They embed these predictions into Salesforce or something like that, and often the predictions make no sense because they're not really carefully thinking about the data, and as the data arrives, there's these data leakage problems. And so we face a lot of challenges. Sometimes they have a lot of data. It's great for analytics purposes. But for predictive purposes, you need to think about a few additional things. And then maybe you have to go all the way back and say, actually, I need those event logs, and I really need to be calculating my, my customer records, updating them so I have customer ID, day features, not just, here's my customer and here's the latest information, which, for something like, which is not always useful, not always required for other applications.
I think for us, not quite the same, Tristan, as what you're describing, but we see, I would say, a range on the maturity curve. And one of the challenges for our subset of customers, which are these B2B SaaS companies with a self-serve model, the term PLG is often used, or product-led growth. It's kind of catch-all for these kind of companies. There is a lot of data collection that needs to happen that many B2B companies haven't been necessarily accustomed to doing in the history of B2B. If you think about the history of B2B, you started with enterprise software, salespeople going to martini lunches, that sort of thing, golf courses, and selling big contracts. I don't want to bring up Cloudera, but maybe a little bit of that happened at Cloudera. And the evolution has gone towards self-serve. So think about Zoom. We're on Zoom right now, or Slack. You can just download the product and start using it. And so as a result, a lot of the companies that we work with, a lot of the people there, have had to learn new skills like collecting product usage data and collecting self-serve billing data. They weren't necessarily doing that 5 to 10 years ago at kind of the earlier generation of enterprise software. So I think that's been something that we've seen as an evolution. And over the last 2 years, our company's only been around for 2 years, but we've seen people catching up there and getting more more mature in terms of what they're how they're collecting that kind of data.
Great. Yeah, thank you, George. You want anything to add here, or we cover it?
I mean, you guys covered it. I would say, one of the things that is worth maybe mentioning is that when in a connected app, the customer owns essentially the ingest into Snowflake and is responsible for getting the data there, modeling it, then they kind of have to think, one of the challenges is getting like the right teams internally involved, the data teams. It's often not the go-to-market team or the marketing team that is like thinking about the entire end-to-end system. And essentially, when you offload some of the pipeline or a big chunk of it to the customer, then you want to make sure that there's the right people involved, the right teams that are kind of looking after it. So getting the data there in the right, in a timely fashion, in the right structures, and having the right SLAs is really important. Otherwise, that's just not a guarantee that the downstream tools can really enforce. If those guarantees aren't in place. So I would say having the right contract and having the right understanding, the right systems in place to monitor the entire end-to-end system is pretty important for certain use cases.
Perfect. Thanks. And so I think one we're getting close to time here. One kind of not question, something I want to ask everyone to share if possible is maybe like a customer win story, kind of high level. Maybe you or like it's a POC or MVP, a trial you did with a customer. How they love the solution, love the different architecture that you provided. Be great if everyone each panelist on here could go through with one quick story about a customer that they've interacted with in this model. This is not a prep question, so this is not a prep question, so I apologize.
I'll go first, and then I'd love to hear folks. So one of our the customers we're proud of is Intercom. So like the SaaS company you're probably familiar with that does sort of chatbot for support and sales, a lot of different use cases. And so they're you're a fairly typical product-led growth company where they have a self-serve product, but then they also have a really big sales and customer success and account management team to help kind of take the initial landed accounts, whether they come in self-serve or sales-led, and then expand them across actually a big product portfolio. They do a lot of cross-sell and expansion as well. And so for us, we started working with them And specifically both with the business side as well as with the data team side to basically leverage Correlated. And Luke, I won't name the product, but it was a different data warehouse in Snowflake. I'm sorry, but anyway, their data was in a data warehouse, and basically used us to kind of be the operational brain that sits in between the warehouse and their downstream go-to-market tools, and help them build what we call playbooks in our product to basically decide when to intervene on the customer success or account management side when customers were showing propensity for expansion or cross-sell, and or conversely showing signs of potential churn risk, that sort of thing. So they're able to use our platform to really flexibly build kind of rules on top of the warehouse, and then we do some by connecting to Salesforce, some routing, so you can actually route those alerts in Salesforce or in Slack, other tools as well, to the right rep that kind of owns the right account, and make sure they're kind of alerted in as near real time as possible based on latency in the warehouse. So kind of an example of how, you know, one of our customers is using us to kind of activate on their customer data to kind of solve some pretty core business problems.
Very cool. I mean, I can jump in here. We see a lot of demand from the retail segment that are basically trying to understand their customers and also understand the logistics of their business. So they're logistically, sort of heavy operation. They have supply chain, right? They have demand for, they have to make buying decisions ahead of time. We have a customer, Veronica Beard, which is a digitally native retailer, and they have exactly sort of those use cases, and they're using machine learning and predictive analytics to basically better understand their customers. So things like, who are they going to purchase? What are they going to purchase? How much are they going to purchase? Where it helps them, optimize marketing spend. It helps them do sort of personalized outreach to those customers. So there's a whole set of use cases which are essentially customer 360 plus, right? Like, let's take customer 360 to the next level. But they're also, as a retailer, they're also in a situation where they have, tons of products, many locations, actually some physical locations, and they need to, have optimize their sort of the logistical aspect, operational aspects of their business. And so in that domain, forecasting is extremely important. So they're really interested in understanding the forecast for sales, out of stock events, sales by product, by region, by store. And so we see them using machine learning to do a lot of those use cases. All the data is, of course, flowing into Snowflake. It's being modeled, using dbt, so leveraging SQL. And then the question is, how do you layer on predictive capabilities without sort of breaking the bank in terms of your team and the operational complexity? And that's where sort of we come in, giving them a simple way to build these kind of continually improving predictive models on top of the data flowing into their data warehouse.
Yeah, for us, one customer that comes to mind is this kind of e-commerce company. They've been on a traditional legacy marketing automation platform for a while, and really there were a lot of limitations when it came to maintaining a lot of the pipelines that had to go directly to and from that original vendor. And so what we've been able to help them with Supergrain is, because they've really invested in their data platform, they invested in dbt, doing all the data modeling there. A lot of the predictive models that they're starting to build, we're able to just point to the outcome, the outputs of those tables, and leverage those for messaging and personalization directly. And it's been able to vastly simplify their architecture, the maintenance, and just kind of the speed of getting up and running. And again, I think over time, as they continue to invest in their data platform, it'll just unlock more data sets, more possibilities, more use cases.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you all. Another question come in. Have you seen of your customers? Something we've seen at Snowflake is we've started to see some customers actually adopt multiple connected apps. And so that's becoming kind of a more preferred solution of when they want to go in and work with a partner or a vendor. They're looking kind of to be connected app first. Do you guys see the same pattern? Are you seeing that some of your customers are also using other connected apps as well, besides your own?
We absolutely see it. We see it in about almost 100% of our customers. And so there's customers that basically are adopting this sort of architecture as the data warehouse is a source of truth. And then I want all my products to integrate with that well. And so, and they're trying to kind of rationalize and build sort of a next gen data architecture that sort of has that perspective in mind. So of course there's ingest, right? That's 5 tran, airbyte, et cetera. Then we do see a lot of reverse ETL, so being a kind of a complement to what we do, because we're generating predictions, we're not activating them, and so then the question is, how do you get it out? So it would be Supergrain, correlated, but also reverse ETL. So we see it's actually amazing how sort of, I would say, standardized the architecture is becoming. The data team is often buying tools that are unique to them. So data observability. They're in some ways connected applications. They're sitting on top of the data warehouse, observing the data, have that same sort of data warehouse first architecture, but serving more of the data team. And so we see this sort of standardized next gen data architecture in almost all of our customers. And yes, adopting multiple tools for sure.
Yeah, and Tristan, I guess for y'all specifically, do you get to use some of that data, that those connected apps provide as a part of your solution?
We are often more the source of the data, and we definitely use the data that's coming in, for instance, from 5tran, absolutely. So that's
Right.
more of an ingestion solution. So whatever you're using for ingest, we absolutely use the the downstream model data of that. I think what people get excited is when they realize, hey, the predictions that Continual is generating, they're not siloed in Continual. They can be put elsewhere, and then they do need a way to actually take an action based on this prediction, right? So they need to get it into some other tool. Otherwise, it's just sitting there and it's in the data warehouse. So I think that's where they they get excited. And of course, your BI tools, right? Your Hexes of the world, your Sigma computings of the world. There's those types of sort of presentation layers. And then there's more like bringing it back to your SaaS applications, or actually next gen connected apps like Supergrain. Braze is another one where we see people using Braze to use, which is kind of Supergrain, maybe not as natively integrated, but we see that quite commonly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one thing before we wrap up here, I wanted to plug, if you're out there and you want to build a connected app and you're looking to do that on top of Snowflake, the Powered by Snowflake program is a great one to be a part of. I know Supergrain is a part of that program with us, and so it's great to have them. I know both Continual and Correlated are also tech partners of Snowflake as well, so it's great to have them on the tech partnership side. But yeah, I would say especially if you're looking to build an app, we'd love to have you in the Powered by Snowflake program. So yeah, I think we're now at the top of the hour here at time. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Luke, for moderating. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, y'all.
George.
Thanks, Tristan.
Thanks, guys. See y'all.
All right.
Bye.
See you, everybody.
Guys.
Bye.